When you think of the year 1776, what comes to mind? Perhaps it is the image of gentlemen in powdered wigs, like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, solemnly signing the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. American history textbooks have always told you that the United States was born in that exact moment, amidst the ringing of Liberty bells. But the truth is, the history books have lied to you. The birth of America was not confined to elegant rooms on the East Coast. There is another 1776, a story far more brutal, bloody, and desperate, quietly unfolding on the other side of the continent. While the Founding Fathers were celebrating democracy, 3,000 miles away to the west, a small group of people was struggling, not for political ideals, but simply to survive. There were no brilliant fireworks, no eloquent founding speeches. There was only thick fog, massive grizzly bears blocking the path, extreme starvation, and fences built of mud. This is the true, untold history of the birth of one of the world's greatest and most iconic cities, San Francisco. But this story does not begin with white armies wielding swords and crosses. It begins with a pristine paradise, a land so abundant that its first inhabitants believed their world was eternal. This was the world of the Yelamu, an Ohlone tribe that had stewarded San Francisco Bay in absolute harmony for thousands of years. Yet, as the Yelamu campfires flickered in the foggy night, they had no idea that a devastating storm was brewing. The greed of Western empires was setting its sights on them, and this quiet paradise was about to be transformed into an inescapable hell. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if you enjoy uncovering the forgotten stories of the past, please subscribe and journey with us through time. For the Yelamu people, this peninsula jutting out into the ocean is the absolute center of the universe. Their existence is a flawless symphony with the untamed wilderness. The primordial San Francisco Bay is not a barren wasteland waiting to be conquered, but rather a massive ecological treasure trove that they have meticulously managed for hundreds of generations. They hunt tule elk, harvest acorns from ancient oak forests, and catch countless water birds that darken the sky using intricately hand-woven nets. In their eyes, this world will remain peaceful forever and can never fall. But tens of thousands of miles away, the ruthless gears of global history are beginning to turn. Across the palaces of Madrid, the mighty Spanish Empire is trembling with fear. They have dominated the waters of the Pacific Ocean for centuries, but now, a phantom from the north is slowly creeping in. Russian sea otter hunters have already planted their flags in Alaska and are relentlessly pushing southward. At the same time, British warships are prowling the waters, circling like sharks that have just caught the scent of blood in the water. Spain understands with terrifying clarity that if they do not act immediately, they will lose the entire western coast of the North American continent. They desperately need an impenetrable defensive stronghold. Their anxious gaze falls upon a legendary region known only as the Northern Mystery, a colossal, magnificent bay that previous maritime explorers have repeatedly missed due to the thick, impenetrable fog that guards its entrance. They must establish a military fortress there at all costs. The plan is set, but there is one deadly obstacle standing in their way. The San Francisco Bay is a natural, isolated fortress, completely surrounded by scorching deserts and treacherous, jagged mountains. Absolutely no one knows how to reach it by land, and all previous attempts to cross this desolate wasteland have ended in tragedy, starvation, and death. Spain needs a miracle. Or they need someone crazy enough to dare to challenge the absolute wrath of nature. And that is exactly when a stubborn, Mexican-born military officer decides to step forward, ready to gamble the lives of hundreds of men, women, and children on a catastrophic death march the likes of which history has never seen. Juan Bautista de Anza is not just a military commander. He is a man haunted by a ghost. His father died dreaming of an overland route to Alta California, and now the son is determined to conquer the impossible. In the fall of 1775, Anza recruits a staggering caravan of 240 desperate souls from the impoverished provinces of New Spain. Make no mistake, these are not elite, battle-hardened conquistadors clad in shining armor. They are destitute families, pregnant women, and terrified children, lured into the wilderness by the empire's false promise of a lush, bountiful paradise. Together, they march straight into the gaping jaws of the Sonoran Desert. What follows is a grueling 1,000-mile death march that defies human endurance. It is an endless, punishing landscape of cracked earth, venomous predators, and bone-dry arroyos. Thirst becomes their constant, suffocating shadow, driving the massive herds of livestock mad and pushing the fragile settlers to the absolute brink of delirium. Yet, the scorching desert heat is only the first layer of their hell. As they push further north into the treacherous mountain passes, the climate violently turns against them. The caravan is suddenly slammed by blinding snowstorms and freezing sub-zero winds. It is a brutal, climatic whiplash that leaves the ragged, starving colonists frostbitten, burying themselves under snow-covered blankets just to survive the freezing nights. Their existence hangs by the thinnest of threads, a thread held largely by a Native American guide named Sebastian Tarrabal. Tarrabal is a runaway who had previously escaped the oppressive mission system, yet he now holds the fate of the Spanish Empire in his hands. Without his intimate knowledge of the hidden watering holes and secret indigenous trading routes, the desert would have swallowed Anza's entire expedition without a trace. Against all mathematical and geographical odds, after months of agonizing torment, the battered survivors finally emerge from the wilderness. They have miraculously defeated the desert. But as Anza stands on a wind-swept cliff in the spring of 1776, looking down at the wild, violently churning waters of the San Francisco Bay, shrouded in thick, unforgiving fog, a chilling realization washes over the expedition. The brutal wilderness behind them was merely a test. Nature had only spared their fragile lives so they could be thrown into an even more merciless tragedy. And the true nightmare of building a city at the edge of the world is only just beginning. It is March 27, 1776. After a seemingly endless journey of 1,500 miles, Anza and a small advance party finally arrive at the tip of the peninsula. They make camp beside a small, pristine body of fresh water known today as Mountain Lake. For a brief, surreal moment, two completely different worlds collide. Two Yelamu men cautiously approach the Spanish camp. There is no gunfire, no immediate violence. The indigenous men simply bring an offering of firewood. To the Yelamu, these exhausted strangers are just weary travelers passing through. They have absolutely no concept that the man standing before them is mapping out the complete destruction of their ancient way of life. Anza spends the next few days feverishly surveying the land. He climbs to a high, windswept bluff overlooking the narrow, treacherous strait that connects the bay to the ocean, the Golden Gate. Here, he boldly declares, Spain will build El Presidio, a mighty fortress to guard the empire. A few miles inland, in a valley sheltered from the biting coastal winds, he selects the perfect spot for a religious compound, Mission San Francisco de Asís. He sketches out his grand imperial blueprints, plants a wooden cross in the earth, and then he leaves. His mission is officially accomplished. Anza turns around and begins the long journey back to Mexico, leaving his trusted lieutenant, José Joaquín Moraga, and the ragged group of settlers completely alone. The colonists are left stranded at the absolute edge of the known world. They are surrounded by an unfamiliar wilderness, shivering in the cold, damp fog, with rapidly dwindling supplies. And it is in this exact moment of profound isolation and despair, as they struggle to pound the very first wooden stakes into the muddy ground to build their fragile settlement, that a profound historical coincidence occurs. The date they officially begin to build their new lives coincides, almost to the day, with an event on the opposite side of the continent that will forever alter the course of human history. Fast forward to the summer of 1776. The date is June 29th. Let us pause for a moment and look across the continent. On the East Coast, in the sweltering heat of Philadelphia, a group of rebellious colonists is finalizing a document that will shatter the British Empire. In exactly 5 days, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin will adopt the Declaration of Independence. The air in Philadelphia is thick with the intoxicating promise of liberty, the birth of a new republic, and the ringing of bells. Now, cut back across 3,000 miles of vast, uncharted wilderness to the foggy, freezing shores of the Pacific. There are no bells here. There is no talk of democracy or human rights. Instead, there is only the howling wind tearing through a pathetic, makeshift shelter constructed of woven brushwood, branches, and mud. Inside this crude tent, shivering against the biting cold, a lone Franciscan friar named Father Francisco Palou raises a chalice. He is celebrating the very first Catholic Mass on the edge of a small, vanishing lake the Spanish call the Lagoon of Sorrows, or Dolores. It is a moment of profound, almost eerie historical poetry. Two completely different Americas are being born at the exact same moment. One is rising in the East, fueled by a burning desire to break free from the chains of a monarchy. The other is struggling to survive in the West, built for the sole purpose of expanding the iron grip of an aging Spanish empire. Neither world has the slightest clue that the other exists. With Father Palou's Mass, the spiritual flag of Spain is officially planted in the soil of San Francisco. A few months later, the military will follow suit, officially dedicating their defensive garrison, El Presidio. In the halls of Madrid, Spanish kings and generals will proudly boast that they have established a mighty, impenetrable stronghold to protect the northern mystery from any foreign invaders. But the truth is a humiliating illusion. If the Russian Navy or the British fleet were to actually sail through the Golden Gate and lay eyes upon this so-called mighty fortress, they would not tremble in fear. They would burst out laughing. When the Spanish finally finish constructing El Presidio in the autumn of 1776, it is not the glorious, impenetrable stone citadel that the King of Spain had envisioned. In reality, it is perhaps the most pathetic military fortress in the history of the Spanish Empire. Imagine a flimsy, square compound made entirely of decaying brushwood, mud, and poorly constructed adobe that simply washes away every time the coastal winter rains arrive. The soldiers stationed here to guard the absolute edge of the empire are living in squalor. They are desperately underfed, completely isolated from civilization, and suffering from scurvy and the relentless, bone-chilling fog. Their military pay rarely arrives, leaving them dressed in tattered rags rather than proud imperial uniforms. To defend this critical, highly coveted harbor against the mighty naval fleets of Russia or Great Britain, this garrison is armed with only a handful of antiquated, heavily rusted bronze cannons, salvaged from older centuries. Some of these cannons are in such a miserable state of disrepair that firing them would likely be more dangerous to the Spanish soldiers than to any approaching enemy ship. It is an absolute military joke, a fragile illusion of power, maintained only by the sheer isolation of the bay. If a foreign armada had actually sailed through the Golden Gate during those early years, the Presidio would have fallen in less than an hour. But as it turns out, the Spanish Empire does not actually need functioning cannons, towering stone walls, or a massive, well-equipped army to conquer California. The true conquest of this land, and the complete subjugation of the Yelamu people, will not be carried out by soldiers wielding muskets. Just a few miles away, in a sheltered valley away from the roaring winds of the bay, the Spanish have deployed an entirely different kind of weapon. It is a weapon of faith, wrapped in the gray robes of Franciscan missionaries, and its silent, devastating power will soon unleash a catastrophic apocalypse upon the native population that no army could ever match. The construction of Mission San Francisco de Asís, commonly known as Mission Dolores, begins with a deceptive sense of peace. The Franciscan friars, driven by a zealous desire to save the souls of the indigenous population, offer the Yelamu food, glass beads, and the promise of salvation. Intrigued, and perhaps seeking an alliance in a rapidly changing world, many Yelamu choose to enter the mission walls. But they soon discover that this sanctuary is, in reality, a meticulously designed trap. The mission is not just a church, it is a forced labor camp designed to systematically eradicate their culture and transform them into loyal, agrarian subjects of the Spanish crown. Once baptized, the Yelamu are strictly forbidden from leaving. If they attempt to escape and return to their ancestral villages, Spanish soldiers brutally hunt them down, drag them back, and publicly flog them. They are stripped of their names, their language, and their freedom. But the crack of the whip is nothing compared to the invisible, microscopic terror that the Spanish have brought with them. Within the cramped, unsanitary confines of the mission adobe walls, European diseases like measles, smallpox, and syphilis explode with apocalyptic fury. The native population, having absolutely no natural immunity, is decimated. It is a quiet, suffocating slaughter. The death toll is so staggering that the friars cannot bury the bodies fast enough. The beautiful, whitewashed walls of Mission Dolores, adorned with intricate, native-painted ceilings, are literally built upon a mass graveyard containing the remains of over 5,000 indigenous people. By the early 19th century, the ecological and cultural devastation is almost absolute. The Spanish cattle have devoured the native grasslands, the ancient oak forests have been chopped down for firewood, and the Yelamu language is rapidly fading into silence. The Spanish Empire has effectively won its spiritual conquest. But history has a cruel sense of irony, and the imperial power that Spain purchased with so much blood and suffering is about to slip through their fingers in the blink of an eye. Fast forward to the year 1822. The mighty Spanish Empire, which sacrificed so much blood, treasure, and human life to claim this foggy peninsula, finally collapses. Mexico wins its hard-fought independence and officially inherits Alta California. But the newly formed Mexican government has absolutely no interest in maintaining this miserable, isolated northern outpost. Almost overnight, San Francisco is completely abandoned and forgotten. The grand imperial blueprints drawn up by Juan Bautista de Anza in 1776 are left to rot. The once feared Presidio literally melts back into the earth, its fragile adobe walls collapsing under the winter rains, eventually turning the military fort into a literal junkyard for the few remaining settlers. The powerful missions are secularized by the government, the Franciscan friars are stripped of their authority, and the surviving Native Americans are turned out into a chaotic world that no longer has a place for them. The original settlement is renamed Yerba Buena, and it quickly devolves into a sleepy, desolate ghost town. For decades, the area is inhabited by only a tiny handful of rugged hide and tallow traders, cattle ranchers, and wandering sailors who occasionally drop anchor in the hauntingly empty bay. If you had stood on the shores of San Francisco in the 1830s, looking at the decaying mud brick ruins and the barren, wind-swept hills, you would have been absolutely certain that this city was dead on arrival. It appeared to be nothing more than a failed colonial experiment, destined to be permanently swallowed by the shifting sand dunes and erased from history. It seems that the desperate, bloody story of 1776 has ended in a pathetic whimper. But the earth beneath their feet is keeping a spectacular, world-altering secret. The very wilderness that had once tried to kill the early Spanish settlers is hiding a glittering yellow prize in the nearby Sierra Nevada mountains, just waiting to be discovered. It is a prize that is about to ignite the greatest mass migration in human history, violently wake this ghost town from the dead, and unleash an era of unparalleled chaos and greed. Fast forward out of the Mexican era. In 1846, the Mexican-American War erupts. In July of that year, Captain John B. Montgomery of the U.S. Navy sails into San Francisco Bay, marches ashore, and raises the American flag over the quiet plaza of Yerba Buena. The United States officially takes control of the desolate outpost. And then, less than 2 years later, in January 1848, an event occurs that changes the trajectory of world history. James Marshall discovers gold at Sutter's Mill, located in the Sierra Nevada foothills, a few days' journey inland. The secret is out, and the gold rush begins. The sleepy village of Yerba Buena, now renamed San Francisco, experiences a violent, chaotic rebirth. It transforms almost overnight from a forgotten outpost into a booming, lawless metropolis. Thousands of prospectors, fortune seekers, merchants, and scoundrels flood into the bay, abandoning their ships in the harbor to rush to the goldfields. The population explodes from less than 1,000 to over 25,000 in just 2 years. A sprawling city of canvas tents, wooden shacks, and eventually grand brick buildings rises rapidly from the sand dunes. San Francisco is reborn as a roaring epicenter of wealth and wild ambition. However, the forces of nature that the Spanish settlers had faced decades earlier have not vanished. In the early morning hours of April 18, 1906, the earth violently ruptures. A massive earthquake, estimated at a magnitude of 7.9, strikes the coast of Northern California. The violent shaking lasts for nearly a minute, shattering the city's modern infrastructure. But the true horror is yet to come. The earthquake ruptures the city's gas lines and water mains. Within minutes, raging fires erupt across the city. With no water to fight the flames, the firestorm sweeps through the densely packed streets for 3 terrifying days, consuming everything in its path. Over 3,000 people perish, and more than 80% of the city is reduced to smoldering ash and twisted iron. It is one of the worst natural disasters in American history. And yet, when the smoke finally clears, a staggering, almost miraculous sight emerges from the apocalyptic ruins of the Mission District. The grand, modern brick cathedrals and towering Victorian mansions have all been leveled by the quake, or incinerated by the fire. But standing proudly amidst the absolute destruction, untouched by the flames and entirely unscathed by the violent tremors, is a simple, humble structure made of sun-baked mud. It is Mission Dolores, the original adobe church constructed by the Spanish friars and the forced labor of the Yelamu people back in the 1770s. Today, as you stand beneath the towering, majestic steel cables of the Golden Gate Bridge, looking out over the glittering, modern metropolis of San Francisco, the violent struggles of 1776 feel impossibly distant. It is a city that has been endlessly celebrated for its staggering wealth, its rapid technological innovation, and its progressive ideals. But beneath the concrete, the asphalt, and the manicured parks lies a profound and complex legacy. If you walk along the bustling waterfront, you are following the very same shoreline where desperate Spanish soldiers once stood shivering in their tattered uniforms, clutching rusted muskets, and staring blindly into the fog. If you sit by the peaceful, restored waters of Mountain Lake, you are resting on the exact spot where Juan Bautista de Anza first envisioned an imperial stronghold, completely unaware of the immense human suffering his blueprint would soon unleash. And if you place your hand in the cool, uneven adobe bricks of Mission Dolores, the oldest surviving structure in the entire city, you are quite literally touching the year 1776. You are touching the dried earth that was mixed with the sweat and blood of the Yelamu people. For over 2.5 centuries, San Francisco has endured. It has survived the collapse of 2 massive colonial empires. It has repeatedly burned to the ground and violently shaken itself apart, only to rebuild itself bigger, richer, and more powerful each time. But the resilient spirit of the original indigenous inhabitants never truly vanished. Today, the descendants of the Ohlone people are still here, fiercely working to reclaim their ancestral heritage and revitalize their languages. Their story, and the story of those early, desperate colonists, is the true foundational bedrock of this city. History is not merely a collection of dates, documents, and old monuments. It is the raw, untamed earth upon which we all stand today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten history of San Francisco, please like this video and subscribe for more untold histories. Don't forget to comment below with the city you'd love to see us explore next, and it might just be featured in our upcoming video. And as always, we'll see you in the past.